Hey, what's up everybody? This is Osterberg501 and today I want to go over my Chaos level 35 Stabomancer and Berserker Frost build. So starting off, Stabomancer's class feat gives us increased critical hit chance 25% at a baseline. Then our Berserker class feat is on action skill start, we become enraged and deal bonus frost damage. And this gives us a massive increase in damage with the items I'm using. And because of our action skill, this is active for our biggest burst windows. And for our action skill we're using from the shadows, puts us into stealth, makes all of our damage be critical hits, but we deal 25% less critical damage, 8-second duration, 36-second cooldown at a baseline. This is our big burst, especially for killing bosses. This just makes us shred through boss health. So for our Berserker tree, we're going Ancestral Frost, 5 out of 5, frost damage increase. We're going Unyielding, 3 out of 3. We just have percentage health regen over time, doubled while enraged. Then we have Icebreaker, 3 out of 3. The closer an enemy is to being frozen, the more damage you deal. Then 5 out of 5, the Old Ways. The closer we are to an enemy, the more damage we deal to them and the less damage we take. Then we have 3 out of 3, Cold Snap, increases our frost efficiency and movement speed, doubled while enraged. Movement speed is also a really big part of this build. Then we have Unarmored Defense. A portion of our ward is reserved and we get that back as maximum health, and we reserve 50% of our ward, but we gain back 150% of that reserved ward as maximum health. Synergizes really well with Unyielding, so we get a ton of health and a ton of health regen. Then we have 5 into Iron Squall, mainly for the fire rate increase, which is 15%, doubled when enraged. Then we have our Capstone, Blood of the Fallen. It's a kill skill. The Fatemaker's remaining action skill cooldown is reduced by a percentage, and if you're currently in your action skill, you restore a percentage of your action skill's duration instead, 20% on each. This will allow us to stay in from the shadows when mobbing a bit easier and get back into from the shadows much quicker when it's on cooldown. Then for our Stabomancer tree, we have 5 into Arsenal, mainly for the 15% gun damage increase, 3 into Haste, so we have movement speed increase, and when we cast a spell, this is doubled for 12 seconds. Again, movement speed is a big part of this build. Then we have Swift Death. When we're moving, we gain increased damage dealt, 10% at default walk speed for 5 out of 5 in this, and we're going to be moving very quickly, so this is going to be a big damage increase. Then we have 2 into Exploit Their Weakness. Enemies take increased damage per unique status effect you apply on them. We have 2 into this, mainly to get lower in the tree. Then we have 1 into Elusive. We can shoot and sprint at the same time, and when moving we have a chance to evade damage, so it's 10% at default walk speed, just like our damage increases, but this is just for evading damage. Then our last 2 are into Sneak Attack, which is critical hit damage increase. So then for our hero stats, we're maxing out Dexterity and Strength for critical hit chance and critical hit damage increases. Then the rest of my points I put into Attunement for a skill cooldown. Now you can go into Attunement, or if you want to be a bit more tanky, you can go into Constitution. Either way, it's not going to be that big of a deal and is mainly based on preference. So then going into our items, I actually have some pretty well-rolled items now since the DLC has been out, and especially with the lucky dice applying to your entire account. I'm not sure if that's the main reason or if I've just been lucky, but I've gotten some pretty ridiculously well-rolled items. So first off, for our weapons, I actually got a Primordial Liquid Cooling. Even though it's nerfed from what it used to be pretty heavily, this is still a really good gun, and I have the highest roll on it, so it's still very good, but this actually isn't as good as some other weapons for bossing. I just switched between this because this is pretty good for mobbing and also decent for boss killing if this is what you have. Another good weapon is the Automagic.exe. It's a pistol that shoots ×3 pellets. I think that's a base roll, I'm not exactly sure, but it's just a pretty good frost pistol. I don't really use this much because I have other weapons, and the weapon I've been using more and more, especially for bosses, are the Frost Hyperius SMGs. Now you want the Hyperius and Frost with the ×4 pellets, because I don't think you can get these ×4 pellet SMGs without it being a frost roll, and these things just do ridiculous damage. These are the guns that shoot 4 bullets in a horizontal line, but again, I've gotten a pretty good roll getting a Primordial, and this does some pretty crazy damage. It's really easy to use against bosses because they're so big of enemies, and you're usually not going to be just running around trying to hit smaller targets or flying enemies or whatever, so it's much easier to hit most of your shots. But this weapon does become much harder to use while mobbing, and that is usually why why I would switch to liquid cooling as well for mobbing. And I rolled the same enchanted on these to just make it a little bit easier, which is on action skill start, increase damage dealt by 20% for 20 seconds. So just a good damage increase. Our melee weapon pretty much are just using for the enchanted, which is on spellcast, increases frost damage by 30% for 5 seconds. So it's a low duration enchant, but really good for mobbing. For my rings, don't really have that well rolled rings. I do have a primordial and a volatile ring, but besides the gun damage on these, they don't do a whole lot. We have action skill duration and cooldown rate, which helps a little bit. Pretty much the only damage increases we're actually getting from these are the gun damage roll on them. I could get much better rings. For my shield, I'm still just using a really high capacity shield, so I'm tanky. The enchanted roll on it is while action skill is active, increase frost damage by 50%. So just massive bursts with our From the Shadows. There's a lot higher DPS shields you could go if you want to, but I just like a tanky shield, and I think my damage is doing pretty well already. Now this is probably one of the best rolled items I think I've gotten in Wonderlands so far. So this is the new armor piece from the DLC, and I got a volatile with pretty much perfect rolls. I got Berserker Power as a main, Stab-O-Mancer as secondary, all damage dealt, gun critical hit chance, and gun damage. Now I think the gun critical chance going to critical hit damage would actually be better, but this is still very well rolled. And this armor piece can apply the new soaked effect, which makes enemies take 50% additional lightning and frost damage, and our crits have a 25% chance to create a nova on whatever enemy we crit, which will soak everything, making them take that additional damage. So this is probably the biggest change up in this build, and this just works very well with this build. Pretty much perfectly created for this build. Then I'm using the Raging Theurge necklace. Now I switched to this because it's whenever you cast a spell, you reduce your remaining action skill cooldown by 20%, and while your action skill is on cooldown, your spell damage is increased. This is mainly to get back into our action skill as much as possible, and this is a good roll as well. Frost damage, Berserker Power, volatile, all damage dealt. The action skill cooldown rate is nice for the statting, but I think getting another damage increase would be a better roll. And then I also got very lucky to get a new Buffmeister. I think this was actually dropped from Chums if I'm not mistaken. But it's a primordial frost Buffmeister, and it has Pew on it. I don't remember the exact buffs Pew gives you, but if you look at the bottom, there's different things that Buffmeisters can roll, and Pew affects your guns. I think it's like fire rate and something else. But the main thing is you're going to want a frost Buffmeister. And I rolled the enchant for action skill start, increases gun damage by 40% for 10 seconds. So again, very bursty. A lot of my enchants are more focused on being able to kill bosses very quickly instead of mobbing, just because mobbing is generally going to be easier. And that's pretty much the entirety of this build. Now for a playstyle, it's pretty simple. You pop your From the Shadows, pop your Buffmeister, try to stay close to the boss, and move around as fast as you can, because the faster you're moving, the more damage you get from some of our passives. And that's pretty much what you're doing for mobbing as well. Mobbing, I think, is a bit easier because you can sprint and shoot. So you're just sprinting around shooting these mobbing enemies. They usually die much quicker, so you can kind of drive by most of the enemies, especially when your Buffmeister is popped and you're in From the Shadows. You can pretty much just drive by all trash enemies and kill them pretty quickly, just fully sprinting, running around destroying enemies. And that's kind of what makes this build kind of fun and a bit unique, because from some of our passives, we want to be as close as we can to an enemy to get more damage increase and damage reduction, but we have a bunch of stuff built into movement speed, which also increases our damage. So you pretty much want to get used to like circling enemies, so moving as fast as you can but staying close to the enemy. So it definitely has some nuance to trying to maximize your output. But that's pretty much all I wanted to go over for this build. So subscribe if you want to see more Wonderlands or other videos. Leave a like if you liked the video. Leave a comment down below what you guys think about this Frost build. And thanks for watching.
As always, good triumphs over evil. Or was it lawful over chaos? I can cast again! That's the measure of you, isn't it?